The conference hall of Celestial Harmony Station floated in the darkness between stars, a massive structure of gleaming metal and crystal that had witnessed 30,000 years of galactic history. Inside its main chamber, representatives from 200 species gathered for what they believed would be another routine session. The air hummed with a dozen different atmospheric mixtures, separated by shimmer fields that allowed each species to breathe comfortably while sharing the same space. Ambassador Thexali stood near the central platform, her crystalline body refracting the soft lights into rainbow patterns across the polished floor. She had served the Galactic Council for 3 centuries, and in all that time she had never seen a session quite as dull as this one. Trade disputes, mining rights, the usual complaints about the Vryn Collective's aggressive expansion policies. Her internal structure resonated with something close to boredom. The discussion droned on. A methane-breathing delegate argued about tariff rates. Another species demanded action against pirates in the outer fringe. Thexali's attention wandered to the massive viewports that lined the chamber walls, showing the peaceful void beyond. 30,000 years of relative peace, she thought. The longest period of stability in recorded galactic history. Not perfect, of course. There were always conflicts, always problems. But nothing like the ancient wars her ancestors had witnessed. The lights flickered. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable. But Thexali's crystalline sensors picked up the disruption immediately. The energy fields maintaining the atmospheric barriers wavered for just a fraction of a second. Around the chamber, other species with sensitive perception began to shift uncomfortably. Then the alarms started screaming. Red emergency lights bathed the conference hall as every sensor on the station suddenly went insane. The main holographic display at the center of the chamber erupted with warnings. Spatial distortion, massive energy signature, unknown contact. The words scrolled faster than most species could read them. All delegates remained calm. The station's AI announced in a voice that suggested it was anything but calm itself. We are detecting an anomaly in nearby space. Security forces are responding. Thexali moved quickly to the nearest data terminal, her crystalline fingers interfacing directly with the system. What she saw made her internal structure go cold. The sensors were detecting something impossible. Space itself was tearing open just 3,000 kilometers from the station. Not a normal jump point or wormhole. This was something else. Something wrong. The main viewport suddenly polarized as blinding light erupted in the void. Every delegate in the chamber rushed to the windows or accessed visual feeds from external cameras. What they saw would be recorded in galactic history for the next 1,000 years. Space was bleeding. There was no other way to describe it. Reality itself seemed to crack and peel away like old paint, revealing something beneath that hurt to look at. Colors that had no names, geometric patterns that made eyes water and minds ache. And through that impossible wound in the universe, something was coming. The ship emerged slowly, like a whale rising from deep ocean waters. It was vast beyond comprehension, easily 10 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The design was unlike anything in the current galactic database. Sharp angles and brutal efficiency, no wasted space, no decorative elements. This was a vessel built for one purpose only, war. By the ancient stars, someone whispered. Thexali realized it was her own voice. The ship's hull bore scars that told stories of battles fought long ago. Massive gouges that had been repaired with metal that didn't quite match. Burn marks from weapons that no longer existed in galactic arsenals. And along its side, etched in letters 300 meters tall, were symbols in a language that Thexali recognized from historical archives, but had never expected to see again. Human writing. Impossible, the Vryn delegate hissed, his multiple eyes widening in what might have been fear. Humans are extinct. They've been extinct for 30,000 years. But the evidence floated before them, massive and undeniable. The tear in space sealed itself behind the ship with a sound that was felt rather than heard. A deep vibration that resonated through the station's hull and made every being present feel suddenly very small. The Council's peacekeeping fleet scrambled immediately. 15 ships representing the best military technology the galaxy had to offer formed a perimeter around the unknown vessel. They were sleek and powerful, equipped with weapons that could crack planets. Against the dark bulk of the human ship, they looked like insects surrounding a sleeping dragon. Unknown vessel, The fleet commander broadcast on all frequencies. You have entered Council space without authorization. Identify yourself immediately. For long moments, there was no response. The human ship simply floated in the void, dark and silent. Its power readings were minimal, as if most of its systems were in standby mode. But even dormant, the vessel radiated a sense of barely contained violence that made the peacekeeping fleet maintain a very respectful distance. Then it spoke. The transmission came in a dialect of galactic standard that hadn't been used in 25,000 years. The words were formal, archaic but perfectly understandable, and the voice that spoke them was artificial, an AI with a cadence that suggested it had been waiting a very long time to deliver this message. This is the Human Defense Force vessel Indomitable, registry number HDF-001, commissioned stardate 3247 of the old calendar. We acknowledge Council authority and request immediate diplomatic audience under the terms of the First Contact Protocols, subsection 7, paragraph 12. We bring greetings from humanity and urgent intelligence regarding the consuming swarm. Silence crashed across every communication channel. In the conference hall, 200 species stood frozen in shock. The consuming swarm. That name existed only in the oldest historical archives, in records so ancient that most scholars considered them mythology rather than fact. Thexali's fingers flew across her terminal, pulling up every scrap of information the Council database had on humans and the swarm. What she found made her wish she had remained ignorant. 35,000 years ago, humanity had made first contact with the galactic community. They had been a young species, aggressive and curious, with technology that was primitive, but showed remarkable potential. They had joined the Council as junior members, eager to learn and contribute. Then came the swarm. No one knew where it came from. Some theories suggested another dimension. Others claimed it was a weapon from an ancient war that had gained sentience. Whatever its origin, the swarm had been an existential threat to all biological life. It consumed matter and energy, growing exponentially, converting everything it touched into more of itself. Planets died. Stars were drained. Entire sectors of the galaxy went dark. The war had been desperate. Species that had been enemies for millennia united against the common threat and humanity. Those strange, aggressive apes from a little blue world had volunteered for the most dangerous mission of all. They would hold the line. The plan had been desperate, but necessary. Create a pocket dimension, an isolated bubble of space-time separate from normal reality. Lure the swarm inside, then seal the entrance, trapping the enemy in a prison from which there was no escape. But someone had to stay inside to make sure the swarm didn't break out. Someone had to keep fighting, keep the enemy contained while the rest of the galaxy recovered. Humanity had volunteered their best ships and their bravest warriors. 50,000 souls aboard the Indomitable and her sister ships. They would enter the pocket dimension and hold it for as long as necessary. The Council had promised to send rescue forces as soon as possible. They had promised that humanity's sacrifice would never be forgotten. That promise had been broken. Thexali found the record buried deep in classified archives. 5,000 years after the dimensional gate was sealed, the Council had officially declared humanity extinct. Earth had been listed as abandoned, its coordinates sold to salvage companies. The few human colonies that had remained outside the pocket dimension had failed or been absorbed into other species' territories. Within 10,000 years, humans had become a footnote in history. Within 20,000 years, they had been forgotten entirely. And now they were back. Council command to all ships. A transmission cut through Thexali's research. The human vessel is powering up. Energy signatures increasing exponentially. All ships maintain defensive posture but do not engage. I repeat, do not engage. Through the viewport, Thexali watched as lights began to appear along the Indomitable's hull. Not the soft glow of normal ships, but harsh white points that looked like stars being born. The vessel's engines came online and the void around it began to distort from the sheer power output. Then every weapon system on every Council ship simultaneously went offline. There was no attack, no visible beam or missile. One moment the peacekeeping fleet was fully armed and dangerous. The next moment every weapons array, every missile tube, every energy cannon simply stopped working. Ship AIs reported the same thing. Their weapons hadn't been damaged or destroyed. They had been turned off, and nothing the crews tried could turn them back on. A demonstration, The Indomitable's AI announced calmly. "We mean no harm to Council forces. But we require you to understand that we are not helpless refugees seeking charity. We are warriors who have held the line for 30,000 years. We have earned the right to be heard." In the conference hall, chaos erupted. Delegates shouted in 100 different languages. Some demanded immediate military action. Others called for evacuation. The Vryn delegate was already moving toward the exits, his species' survival instincts overriding any sense of diplomatic duty. Thexali remained at her terminal, accessing more files, piecing together the truth. She found ship manifests, names of the 50,000 humans who had volunteered for the mission, service records, personal logs that had been preserved in the archives before being forgotten. These were not monsters or invaders. These were people who had given up everything to save a galaxy that had abandoned them. "Attention Council delegates," the station AI announced. "We are receiving a formal request for transport. The human commander wishes to address the Council in person. Shuttle Bay 3 is being prepared." "Absolutely not," the Vryn delegate shouted, his voice carrying across the chamber. "We cannot allow an unknown military force to board this station. It's a security nightmare." But Thexali was already moving toward the shuttle bay. She had to see this for herself. She had to know what kind of person could survive 30,000 years of war and still come seeking diplomacy rather than vengeance. The shuttle that docked at Bay 3 was small and utilitarian, showing the same battle-scarred aesthetic as the Indomitable itself. When the airlock opened, a single figure emerged, and Thexali felt her crystalline structure resonate with something close to awe. The human was tall, with dark skin and close-cropped gray hair. She wore a uniform that looked like it had been designed by someone who expected to do a lot of fighting and wanted nothing to get in the way. Her eyes were hard but not cruel, carrying the weight of experiences that Thexali couldn't begin to imagine. And on her chest, below rows of medals and service ribbons, was a name tag that read simply, ADM, Okonkwo. Admiral Kezia Okonkwo stepped onto the station and looked around at the gathered delegates with an expression that might have been disappointment or might have been resignation. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong, carrying the authority of someone who had commanded in situations where the wrong decision meant the extinction of all life. 30,000 years ago, humanity made a promise to this council. "We promised we would hold the line against the swarm while you recovered and rebuilt. We kept that promise. We fought in a pocket dimension where time moved differently, where the laws of physics were suggestions rather than rules. We lost ships. We lost people. We lost everything except our determination to complete the mission." She paused, and in that silence, Thexali could hear the unspoken accusation. "We were promised rescue. We were promised that the galaxy would remember our sacrifice. Instead, we found our homeworld listed as extinct, our species erased from history, our heroism forgotten." Okonkwo's hands clenched into fists, but her voice remained steady. "But we are not here for revenge. We are here to collect what was promised to us. We held the line. Now we've come to take back what's ours." The Admiral's eyes swept across the assembly, and every delegate who met that gaze felt the weight of 30,000 years of betrayal. "We're going home to Earth, and when we get there, whoever has taken our world will have exactly one chance to leave peacefully." The conference room aboard the Indomitable was nothing like the luxurious chambers of Celestial Harmony Station. The walls were bare metal, scarred from impacts that had probably killed the people standing near them when they hit. The table was bolted to the floor. The chairs were designed for function, not comfort, and the air tasted of recycled atmosphere that had been breathed and recycled so many times it had lost any connection to natural air. Thexali sat across from Admiral Okonkwo, trying not to stare at the woman who had just lived through 30 millennia of war. The council had granted permission for a small delegation to board the human vessel, though Thexali suspected it was less about diplomacy and more about gathering intelligence. She had volunteered immediately, driven by guilt and curiosity in equal measure. "You look uncomfortable," Okonkwo said, her voice carrying a hint of dark amusement. "I apologize for the accommodations. We weren't exactly equipped to receive guests. Everything on this ship is built to survive conditions that would tear apart your modern vessels." "How many of you are there?" Thexali asked. "The record said 50,000 volunteers entered the pocket dimension. Are they all still?" "Alive? Yes, in stasis. We rotate crews on a schedule, 5,000 awake at a time, serving for what, Feels like 10 years subjective, then back into the pods while another crew takes over. It's the only way we could maintain our sanity and our supplies. Okonkwo leaned back in her chair, and Thexali noticed how the Admiral's hand never strayed far from the weapon holstered at her hip. 30,000 years of war would teach that kind of reflex. Time moved differently in the pocket dimension, Okonkwo continued. For every year that passed in normal space, we experienced about 3 months. So while 30,000 years passed out here, we subjectively experienced about 7,000 years of continuous combat. Long enough to become very, very good at killing things that don't want to die. Thexali felt her crystalline structure grow cold. 7,000 years of war. The longest conflict in Council history had lasted barely 300 years, and that had been considered an unthinkable tragedy. She couldn't imagine what 7,000 years of combat would do to a species, to a culture, to individual minds. The swarm, Thexali said carefully. What happened to it? Okonkwo's expression went flat. We killed it, mostly. It took us 6,000 years, but we hunted down every last fragment, every last seed of it. We burned it out of existence with weapons that would horrify your modern sensibilities. And when we were finally certain it was dead, we waited. We waited 1,000 more years, making sure nothing grew back, nothing escaped. Only then did we attempt to open a gate back to normal space, and you succeeded, obviously. Okonkwo gestured around the ship. Though the process damaged our dimension drive beyond repair, this was a one-way trip. We can't go back and nothing can follow us. The pocket dimension is collapsing even now, folding in on itself. In another few months it will cease to exist entirely. Thexali accessed her datapad, pulling up the information she had gathered. Admiral, I need to show you something. I need to show you what happened to Earth after you left. The holographic display activated, showing an image of a blue-green world, Earth, as it had been 35,000 years ago. Beautiful. Vibrant. Thexali watched Okonkwo's face as the image rotated slowly. The Admiral's expression remained carefully neutral, but her eyes told a different story. This is Earth now, Thexali said quietly, changing the image. The planet that appeared was barely recognizable. The blue oceans had turned muddy brown. The green continents were scarred with massive strip mines that were visible from space. The white polar caps had melted entirely, and surrounding the planet was a network of industrial stations, processing facilities, and cargo haulers that turned the orbital space into a junkyard. What did they do? Okonkwo's voice was barely a whisper. What did they do to our home? The Vrin Collective purchased salvage rights to Earth 28,000 years ago, Thexali explained, hating every word. By that point, humanity had been declared extinct. The planet was listed as abandoned. The Council voted to allow commercial exploitation. It was all legal, all according to procedure. Okonkwo stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the metal floor. She walked to the viewport, staring out at the stars. Thexali could see the Admiral's reflection in the glass, and the expression on that face was something that belonged on the battlefield, not in a diplomatic meeting. 28,000 years, Okonkwo said. They couldn't wait even 2,000 years before selling our world like scrap metal. Tell me, Ambassador Thexali, how much did they get for it? I don't think that information would be helpful right now. Tell me. It wasn't a request. Thexali checked her data. 3 million credits, the equivalent of what you might pay for a small mining station in the outer territories. They sold your entire planet for less than the cost of a single Council warship. The Admiral's fist slammed into the viewport hard enough to make Thexali jump. The reinforced crystal didn't break, but spiderweb cracks appeared where human flesh had met military-grade transparent alloy. Okonkwo didn't seem to notice or care about her bleeding knuckles. We held the line, Okonkwo said, her voice deadly quiet. We stayed in that hell dimension for 7,000 years of subjective time. We watched our friends die. We watched our ships burn. We fought creatures that could manipulate matter with their thoughts, that could survive in the vacuum of space, that felt no fear and gave no mercy. And we won. We saved the galaxy from extinction. and our payment was to be forgotten and have our homeworld strip-mined for parts. Admiral, I understand your anger, but you must understand the position the Council is in. The Vryn have legal ownership of Earth. They have invested trillions of credits in the infrastructure surrounding it. Galactic law is very clear on this matter. Okonkwo turned from the viewport, and Thexali saw something in those eyes that made her want to run. This was not the face of a diplomat or politician. This was the face of someone who had spent 7,000 years learning how to kill things that wouldn't stay dead. Let me tell you about galactic law, Ambassador. In the pocket dimension, we encountered what we called breakers. They were swarm entities that could phase through solid matter, making them almost impossible to contain or kill. They would materialize inside our ships, killing crew members before we could respond. Do you know how we solved that problem? Thexali shook her head, not trusting her voice. We created a resonance field that would destabilize any matter trying to phase through our hulls. Any matter at all. Which meant if a breaker tried to materialize inside our ship, it would be torn apart at the molecular level. But it also meant that anyone teleporting in, friendly or not, would die instantly. We lost 3 ships because crews tried to evacuate using transporters and were vaporized by their own defensive fields. Okonkwo walked slowly back to the table, each step deliberate. We kept using those fields anyway, because the alternative was extinction. We learned to make impossible choices. We learned that sometimes you have to sacrifice everything to win. And we learned that laws, rules, and procedures mean absolutely nothing when you're fighting for survival. She leaned forward, placing both hands on the table. So here's what's going to happen, Ambassador. We are going to Earth. We are going to reclaim our homeworld. And if the Vryn want to dispute our claim, they're welcome to try. But I should warn you that this ship was designed to fight enemies that could warp reality itself. Your modern weapons are like throwing stones at a tank. You're talking about starting a war, Thexali said, her voice shaking. The Vryn have hundreds of ships. The Council has thousands. You have one vessel, no matter how powerful. One vessel crewed by 50,000 people who have spent 7,000 years perfecting the art of warfare. One vessel equipped with technology that makes your modern ships look like children's toys. And one vessel commanded by someone who has absolutely nothing left to lose. Okonkwo straightened up. Tell the Council we're leaving for Earth in 72 hours. Anyone who wants to evacuate the planet before we arrive is welcome to do so. After that, anyone still there will be considered hostile. Thexali wanted to argue, wanted to explain how this would destroy the peace that had lasted 30,000 years. But looking at Admiral Okonkwo, she realized the futility of it. This woman had walked through hell and come out the other side. She had kept her promise while the galaxy broke theirs. What argument could possibly change her mind? I need to show you something else, Thexali said quietly. Something I found in the deep archives. Something that was buried deliberately. She pulled up a new file on her datapad. 5,000 years after the dimensional gate was sealed, the Council voted on whether to attempt a rescue mission. They had the technology. They could have tried. The vote was 473 against, 12 in favor. The official reason was that it would be too dangerous, that the swarm might escape if the gate was opened. The real reason? Okonkwo asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. The real reason was that everyone assumed you were already dead. Opening the gate would be risky and expensive for people who were probably already extinct. So they voted to leave you there. To leave you fighting forever. And then they voted to classify the entire decision, to bury it so deep that no one would ever question what happened to humanity. Thexali looked up at the Admiral. I'm telling you this because I think you deserve to know the truth. But I'm also telling you because I hope it might change what you do next. The people who made that decision are long dead. Every species that voted against rescue has changed governments 100 times since then. The galaxy you saved doesn't exist anymore. But Earth does, Okonkwo said, and that's enough. The door to the conference room opened and a younger human entered. She wore the same utilitarian uniform, but her movements had an edge that suggested combat training so ingrained it had become reflex. Admiral, we have a situation. The Council fleet is taking up defensive positions around the station. They're not targeting us, but they're definitely not letting us leave without a fight. Okonkwo nodded. Prepare the crew rotation. I want fresh people at all stations. And activate the defensive grid. All of it? The younger human asked, her eyes widening slightly. All of it, Let's show them why their ancestors were wise to remember humanity with fear. As the younger officer left, Thexali stood. Admiral, please reconsider. If you fight the Council fleet, you'll make enemies of the entire galaxy. There will be no going back from that. Ambassador, we were erased from history. Our homeworld was sold for scrap. Our sacrifice was forgotten, and our heroism was buried in classified files. There is already no going back. Okonkwo walked to the door, then paused. But I want you to know something. We don't want to be the galaxy's enemies. We don't want war. We just want what was promised to us. We want to go home. Thexali watched the Admiral leave, then looked back at the image of Earth on the display. A ruined world, strip-mined and exploited, that had once been the cradle of a species brave enough to walk into hell itself to save strangers. She made a decision in that moment, one that would probably end her diplomatic career but felt more right than anything she had done in 300 years of service. She opened a secure channel to her government. This is Ambassador Thexali. I'm requesting immediate audience with the High Council. I have information about the human situation that must be heard, and I'm formally recommending that we support their claim to Earth, regardless of the legal complications. There was a long pause. Then her supervisor's voice came through. Ambassador, do you understand what you're saying? Supporting the humans means going against 300 years of legal precedent. It means potentially starting a war with the Vryn Collective. I understand perfectly, Thexali replied. And I'm saying we owe humanity this debt. They saved us, all of us. Every species currently alive in this galaxy exists because 50,000 humans volunteered to fight and die in a hell dimension. The least we can do is give them back their homeworld. The Council won't agree to this. Then the Council is wrong, and history will judge us all for it. Thexali closed the channel and looked out at the Indomitable floating in the void, a single ship against an entire galaxy. But somehow, looking at that scarred and ancient vessel, she didn't think the galaxy's odds were very good at all. The journey to Earth took 3 weeks at standard galactic speeds, but the Indomitable made it in 10 days. Thexali, who had been granted permission to accompany the human vessel as an observer, spent most of that time trying to understand what she was seeing. The ship's engines operated on principles that shouldn't work according to modern physics, bending space in ways that made her sensors report errors rather than actual readings. She had been given quarters near the bridge, a small room that was Spartan even by military standards, a bed, a desk, a viewport, nothing else. But compared to what the human crew had endured for 7,000 years, it was probably considered luxury. She saw them in the corridors, these warriors from another age, and each encounter left her more unsettled. They moved with a kind of efficiency that spoke of endless practice. No wasted motion, no casual chatter. Every action had purpose, and their eyes held something that Thexali had never seen in any modern soldier. They had the look of people who had survived not just combat but annihilation, who had stared into the void and refused to blink. On the 5th day of the journey, Admiral Okonkwo invited her to observe a crew rotation. Thexali followed the Admiral into the ship's core, deep in the belly of the vessel where the stasis pods were stored. The chamber was enormous, stretching up for what must have been hundreds of meters. Tens of thousands of pods lined the walls, each containing a human in perfect preservation. This is how we survived, Okonkwo explained as technicians began the wake-up sequence for the next rotation. 5,000 awake, 45,000 sleeping. Every 10 years subjective time, we switch. The people going into stasis brief the people waking up, transfer command, and then we sleep while they fight. It's the only way we could maintain operational effectiveness over 7,000 years. Thexali watched as the pods began to open, frost escaping in clouds of vapor. The humans inside stirred slowly, their bodies recovering from the long sleep. Some of them looked young, barely adults. Others showed the signs of age and hard living. But all of them had the same look in their eyes when they fully woke. The look of people remembering where they were and what they had to do. How do you tell them? Thexali asked. How do you explain that 30,000 years have passed? We don't sugarcoat it, Okonkwo said. They deserve the truth. They deserve to know that the galaxy forgot us, that our homeworld was sold, that everything we fought for was thrown away, and then we tell them that we're going to take it back. A young woman climbed out of her pod, supported by a technician. She wore only a thin medical gown, but she stood at attention when she saw Admiral Okonkwo. Commander Chen reporting for duty, Admiral. What's our status? At ease, Commander. We're out of the pocket dimension. The swarm is dead, and we're on our way home to Earth. Okonkwo's voice carried across the chamber, and every human who heard it stopped what they were doing. But there's something you all need to know. Earth has been occupied by a species called the Vryn Collective. They've been strip mining our world for 28,000 years. The silence that followed was absolute. Thexali watched as the implications sank in for these newly awakened soldiers. Some of them clenched their fists. Others simply stared in disbelief. One older man turned away, and she saw his shoulders shake with what might have been tears or rage or both. We're going to take it back, Okonkwo continued. Peacefully if possible. But we will take it back. The galaxy owes us that much. Earth is ours, and we're bringing our people home. Commander Chen nodded slowly. Then let's go get our planet back, Admiral. We didn't survive 7,000 years of hell just to be told we can't go home. The wake-up process continued, and Thexali found herself moving through the chamber, observing the reactions. Every human who woke up went through the same cycle. Confusion, understanding, anger, and then a kind of cold determination that made her nervous. These were not people who would accept defeat. They had been tested in ways that would break most species, and they had endured. On the 7th day, they passed through a sector that had once been human territory. The navigation computer still had the old colonial maps, and Okonkwo ordered the ship to detour through several systems that had once hosted human settlements. What they found was heartbreaking. The first colony, New Shanghai, was completely gone. The planet's surface had been stripped down to bedrock by automated mining systems that had continued working long after the colony failed. The orbital stations were debris fields now, picked clean by salvagers over thousands of years. Nothing remained but wreckage and graves. They found a memorial satellite in the second system, New Nairobi. It was still broadcasting after 30,000 years, a testament to human engineering. The message was simple and devastating. This is New Nairobi Memorial Beacon. If anyone is receiving this, please know that we tried. We tried to maintain the colony after Earth went silent. We tried to wait for the warriors to return. But our population was too small, our resources too limited. We lasted 800 years before the last of us accepted the inevitable. To whoever finds this, please remember that humans lived here. We built cities. We raised children. We had dreams. Please remember us. The bridge was silent as the message finished. Thexali saw Admiral Okonkwo's jaw clench, saw her hands grip the armrests of her command chair hard enough that the metal groaned. Mark these coordinates, the Admiral said quietly. When we reclaim Earth, we're coming back for our people. Every human colony, every memorial, every grave. We're bringing them all home. The third system held a surprise. New Mumbai's orbital stations were still partially functional, running on automated systems that had somehow survived the millennia. And in the data cores of those stations they found something precious, files. Thousands upon thousands of files. Human literature, art, music, history. An archive of everything the colonists had been able to save before their civilization collapsed. Download everything, Okonkwo ordered. Every byte of data. This is our heritage. This is proof that we existed, that we built something worth remembering. As the data transferred, Thexali watched the Admiral access some of the files. Music played over the bridge speakers, strange melodies that no living being had heard in 30 millennia. Images appeared on the screens, showing human cities at their height, children playing in parks, families gathered for celebrations. The gap between that vibrant past and the present reality was almost too much to contemplate. They had children, one of the crew members whispered. The colonies had children. What happened to them? They grew old and died, Okonkwo said flatly. And their children grew old and died. And eventually there was no one left. That's what happens when you're forgotten. On the 10th day, Earth's star system appeared on the long-range sensors. So all humans had called it. A yellow star not particularly remarkable by galactic standards. But to the 50,000 people aboard the Indomitable, it was the most important point of light in the universe. This was home. This was what they had fought for. Admiral, we're picking up a lot of traffic in the system, the sensor operator reported. Hundreds of ships, mining vessels, processing facilities, cargo haulers. The Vryn have built an entire industrial complex around Earth. And Earth itself? Okonkwo asked, though her voice suggested she didn't want to know the answer. Heavy ecological damage. The atmosphere is barely breathable. Most of the surface has been excavated for mineral extraction. There are no signs of human structures remaining above ground. Thexali saw the Admiral close her eyes for a moment, saw her take a deep breath and then open them again. Whatever emotion she had felt was locked away now, replaced by the cold calculation of a military commander. Open a channel to the Vryn Colonial Authority. Let's see if they're reasonable. The response came within minutes. A Vryn administrator appeared on the main screen, his multiple eyes adjusting to focus on the bridge. The Vryn were an insectoid species, efficient and ruthless when it came to resource extraction. They had built an empire on the principle that everything was for sale and nothing was sacred. Unknown vessel, you are entering Vryn commercial space without authorization. State your business or be considered hostile. This is Admiral Kezia Okonkwo of the Human Defense Force. We're here to reclaim Earth. You have 72 hours to evacuate all personnel and facilities from the planet and surrounding space. After that deadline, anyone remaining will be forcibly removed. The Vryn administrator's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Humans? Humans are extinct. This is some kind of joke, and even if you were somehow actually human, Earth is Vryn property. We purchased it legally from the Galactic Council 30,000 years ago. You have no claim here. We have the only claim that matters, Okonkwo said, her voice cold enough to freeze stars. That planet is our homeworld. Our people were born there. Our history was written there. And we're taking it back. You're threatening war over a legal commercial transaction? Do you have any idea how many ships we have in this system? Your single vessel, no matter how large, cannot stand against our entire fleet. Okonkwo smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. You have 72 hours. I suggest you use them wisely. The channel closed. Thexali moved closer to the Admiral. He's right about one thing. The Vryn have approximately 300 ships in this system. Most are mining vessels, but at least 50 are military grade. You can't fight all of them, can I? Okonkwo turned to her crew. Battle stations. Prepare for hostile engagement. But remember, we're here to reclaim our planet, not destroy it. Precision strikes only. No weapons that will cause long-term ecological damage. Admiral, Thexali said urgently, you're about to start a war. Please let me try to negotiate with the Council. Give me time to convince them that your claim is just. Okonkwo looked at her with something that might have been pity. Ambassador, we've been waiting 30,000 years. We're done negotiating. We're done being patient. We're done believing that the galaxy will do the right thing. Now we're taking what's ours. The Indomitable accelerated toward Earth, and every sensor in the system locked onto it. The Vryn fleet began to mobilize, ships breaking from their mining operations to form defensive positions. On Earth's surface, evacuation alarms were probably sounding as the corporate administrators realized that this was not a bluff. Thexali accessed the communication systems and sent an urgent message to the Council. This is Ambassador Thexali. The humans are initiating hostile action against Vryn forces at Earth. I need immediate Council authorization to support their claim. If we don't act now, there's going to be a massacre. The response came from her supervisor, and it was not what she wanted to hear. Ambassador, the Council has voted. They support Vryn's legal ownership of Earth. You are ordered to evacuate the human vessel immediately and return to neutral territory. That's the wrong decision, Thexali said. These humans saved the galaxy. We owe them this debt. The Council has spoken. Return to neutral territory. That's an order. Thexali looked at Admiral Okonkwo, who was calmly issuing orders to her crew. She looked at the view screen showing Earth, that ruined world that had once been the cradle of a species brave enough to volunteer for extinction. And she made her choice. Admiral, I'm staying. Whatever happens next, I want to witness it. Okonkwo glanced at her, surprised. You understand that you're defying your government? Your career is over. My career was over the moment I learned the truth about what we did to you. Some debts are more important than careers. Thexali settled into an observer's seat. Besides, someone needs to document this for the history files. The galaxy forgot you once. I won't let that happen again. The Vryn fleet was in position now. 50 military vessels surrounding the planet in a defensive sphere. Against a normal ship, it would be an impenetrable defense. Against the Indomitable, it was about to become a demonstration of exactly how far humanity had evolved during their long war in the pocket dimension. All ships, Okonkwo said, her voice carrying across every channel. You have one last chance. Evacuate the planet and we'll let you leave in peace. Stay, and we'll show you why your ancestors were wise to fear humanity. The Vryn commander's response was predictable. All ships engage the hostile vessel. Destroy it. Admiral Okonkwo leaned back in her chair and gave the order that would change galactic history. Show them what we learned in hell. Engage. The battle lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Thexali would remember that number for the rest of her life, along with everything else she witnessed on that day. 4 minutes to completely reshape the galactic understanding of what was possible in warfare. The Vryn fleet opened fire first, 50 military vessels unleashing everything they had at maximum range. Energy beams that could cut through mountain ranges. Missiles equipped with warheads that could crack moons. Electronic warfare packages designed to scramble the most advanced AI systems. It was a coordinated assault that represented the pinnacle of modern military doctrine. Executed by professional crews with decades of training, the Indomitable didn't even slow down. Thexali watched on the displays as the weapons fire approached the human vessel. She expected shields to flare, defensive systems to engage, the usual dance of attack and defense that defined modern space combat. What happened instead made her crystalline structure go cold with a kind of primal fear she didn't know she could feel. The Indomitable's defensive grid activated, and reality bent. There was no other way to describe it. The space around the human ship twisted in ways that made the sensors scream. The incoming weapons fire didn't hit shields. It simply stopped existing. Energy beams were redirected back at the ships that fired them. Missiles detonated prematurely or turned around to target their own launchers. Electronic warfare packages crashed into the defensive grid and emerged as random static. "What are they doing?" Thexali whispered. "What kind of technology is that?" "Dimensional warfare," Admiral Okonkwo said calmly as if she was discussing the weather. "We learned it fighting the swarm. Normal shields try to stop attacks. Our grid shifts them into pocket dimensions where they can't hurt us. Anything that touches our defensive perimeter essentially ceases to exist in this reality." The Vryn fleet was in chaos. Their initial barrage had not only failed, but had actively damaged their own forces. Ships were reporting systems failures, hull breaches, and casualties, and the Indomitable was still accelerating toward them. "Second wave, target their engines," Okonkwo ordered. "Let's give them one more chance to run." The Indomitable's weapons came online, and Thexali saw technology that shouldn't exist. The ship deployed thousands of small drones, each one barely larger than her hand. They launched from ports all along the hull and accelerated at speeds that made them invisible to normal tracking systems. The Vryn point defense systems tried to engage, but the drones moved through space like they were sliding between the gaps in reality. Within seconds, every Vryn military ship lost its engines. The drones had struck with surgical precision, not destroying the ships but crippling them completely. Crews were intact. Life support was functional. But the vessels were now dead in space, unable to maneuver or escape. "I'm sending medical drones to treat your casualties," Okonkwo broadcast to the Vryn fleet. "You have 2 hours to abandon ship. After that, we're moving these wrecks out of Earth's orbit whether you're still aboard or not." The Vryn commander was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the sound of someone whose entire understanding of reality had just been shattered. "What are you? What kind of monsters did we provoke?" "We're the people who held the line," Okonkwo replied. "We're the ones who stayed in hell while you forgot about us. And now we're taking back what's ours." Evacuation ships began launching from the crippled fleet. The Vryn were abandoning their positions, and Thexali couldn't blame them. In less than 5 minutes, the most advanced military force the Vryn collective could muster had been rendered completely helpless. Not destroyed. That would have been almost merciful. Instead, they had been made irrelevant, shown just how vast the gap was between their capabilities and humanity's. But the military fleet was not the only threat. The orbital stations, the mining facilities, the processing plants, all of them were armed with defensive weapons, and their corporate owners were not going to abandon billions of credits in infrastructure without a fight. "Incoming fire from Orbital Platform 7, a sensor operator reported. "They're using mass drivers, tungsten rods, kinetic kill weapons." The Vryn had chosen weapons that didn't rely on energy or guidance systems, simple physics. Chunks of metal accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. Against a normal ship, they would be devastating. But the Indomitable was not a normal ship. The defensive grid flared again, and the tungsten rods simply disappeared. Thexali checked the sensors, trying to understand where they went. The readings suggested they had been shunted into a pocket dimension, trapped in a space that existed outside normal reality. The Vryn were firing weapons into a void that would never give them back. "They're not stopping," Thexali said. "The corporate administrators are ordering the stations to continue firing. They think if they throw enough at you, something will get through." Okonkwo's expression hardened. "Then we'll have to be more direct. Target the station's power cores. Precision strikes. I want them disabled, not destroyed. Those facilities can be repurposed once we reclaim the planet." The Indomitable's main weapons engaged, and Thexali finally understood what 7,000 years of warfare against reality-warping enemies had produced. The beams that lanced out from the human ship weren't simple energy weapons. They were something fundamentally different. They didn't burn through armor or overwhelm shields. They simply unmade things. She watched as the targeting beam touched an orbital station's power core. The entire structure froze for a fraction of a second, and then the power core ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not exploded, just gone as if it had never been there in the first place. The station went dark immediately, all systems shutting down as their power source vanished from reality. "Molecular disassembly," Okonkwo explained, seeing Thexali's shocked expression. "We break the atomic bonds holding matter together. The atoms don't go anywhere. They just stop being part of a cohesive structure. It's clean, efficient, and completely reversible if we know what we're doing." Station after station went dark. The Vryn mining facilities, stripped of power, became nothing more than floating debris. The processing plants shut down. The cargo haulers lost their orbital control systems and began drifting. In less than an hour, the entire industrial complex that had surrounded Earth for 28,000 years was rendered completely inert. And through it all, the Indomitable hadn't received a single scratch. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Earth's surface," the communications officer reported. "It's weak, encrypted with old human protocols. Someone down there is trying to reach us." Okonkwo sat forward in her chair. "Put it through." The signal was crackling and broken, distorted by interference and the degraded atmosphere. But the voice that came through was unmistakably human. "Unknown human vessel, this is Refuge Alpha. We read you. We've been waiting for you. Please respond." The bridge went absolutely silent. Every crew member stopped what they were doing and stared at the communication station. Thexali saw tears on the faces of hardened warriors, saw Admiral Okonkwo's hands shake as she gripped the armrests of her command chair. "This is Admiral Kezia Okonkwo, of the Human Defense Force vessel Indomitable. Who is this? Who are you?" "My name is Marcus Chen. I'm the administrator of Refuge Alpha, one of 12 surviving underground settlements on Earth." "Admiral, there are still humans here." "Not many. Maybe 50,000 total across all the refugees. We've been hiding from the Vryn for thousands of years, preserving what we could of our culture, waiting for rescue. We never stopped believing that someone would come back for us." Okonkwo closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, tears were streaming down her face. She didn't bother wiping them away. "Mr. Chen, this is going to sound impossible, but we're the rescue force. We're the people who went into the pocket dimension 30,000 years ago, and we're here to bring our people home." There was a long silence from the surface. When Marcus Chen spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "The old stories were true. The legends about the warriors who would return, we thought they were just myths, ways to give our children hope. But you're real. You came back. We kept our promise," Okonkwo said. "We held the line, and now we're here to take you home. All of you." "How bad is the situation down there?" "Bad, Admiral. The Vryn mining operations destroyed most of the surface ecosystem. We've been living in deep underground shelters, growing food in hydroponic gardens, breathing recycled air. We have maybe a generation left before our systems fail completely. If you hadn't come when you did..." He didn't need to finish that sentence. "We're coming down," Okonkwo said. "Prepare to receive landing craft. We're evacuating everyone off the surface and getting them to safety before we start cleanup operations." As the crew began coordinating rescue operations, Thexali accessed her communication systems and sent another message to the Council. This time she included full sensor logs of everything that had just happened. The battle, the technology, the revelation that humans still lived on Earth. "This is Ambassador Thexali. The situation has changed significantly. The humans have demonstrated military capabilities far beyond anything in the current galactic arsenal. They have also discovered surviving human populations on Earth. I am formally requesting emergency council session to discuss recognition of Earth as human. territory and immediate humanitarian assistance for the survivors. Her supervisor's response was immediate and panicked. "We're watching the sensor feeds from the Vryn fleet. What kind of weapons are those? How is that ship doing what it's doing? They spent 7,000 years fighting enemies that could manipulate reality itself. They learned, they adapted, and they became something that makes our modern military look like children with toys." Texali paused, and more importantly, they never forgot their humanity. They could have destroyed the Vryn fleet. They could have massacred everyone. Instead, they disabled ships and gave crews time to evacuate. They targeted infrastructure, not people. These are not monsters. These are heroes who deserve better than what we gave them. The council was in chaos. Texali could hear it in the background chatter. The panicked voices of representatives from dozens of species all talking at once. The humans had just demonstrated that the entire galactic military doctrine was obsolete. Every weapon system, every defensive strategy, every tactical manual, all of it was worthless against technology that could manipulate dimensional physics. But more than that, they had found humans alive on Earth. The genocide that the galaxy had assumed, the extinction they had all accepted, had never been complete. Humanity had survived. They had endured underground while the galaxy sold their world and forgot their sacrifice. And now they were demanding justice. "Ambassador," her supervisor said carefully, "the Council is voting on an emergency resolution. Multiple species are proposing that we recognize human sovereignty over Earth immediately. The Vryn are screaming about property rights and legal precedent, but they're being shouted down. No one wants to be on the wrong side of this. Tell them to vote quickly," Texali said, "because the humans aren't waiting for permission anymore." On the main view screen, she watched as the first landing craft departed from the Indomitable. They were heading to the surface to retrieve the survivors, to bring them up to the ship where they could receive medical care, real food, and the first safety they had known in millennia. The crew was moving with a kind of focused intensity that spoke of mission accomplishment after an impossibly long wait. Admiral Okonkwo stood at the viewport looking down at Earth. The planet was scarred and damaged, barely recognizable as the beautiful blue world from the old records. But it was still home, and there were still humans there waiting to be saved. "We made it," Okonkwo said quietly. 7,000 years. 50,000 of us held the line, and we made it home." Texali moved to stand beside the Admiral. "What will you do now? When the survivors are safe and Earth is secured, what comes next for humanity?" Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment, still staring at the planet below. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who had earned the right to make demands of the universe. "We're going to rebuild. We're going to restore Earth to what it was. We're going to find every human memorial, every lost colony, every forgotten grave. We're going to gather all of our people, living and dead, and bring them home. And then we're going to make sure that the galaxy never forgets us again. And if the galaxy tries to stop you," the Admiral smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression, "then we'll remind them why their ancestors were wise to fear humanity. We walked through hell and came out the other side stronger. We're not the victims anymore. We're survivors, and we're taking our place back." On the surface of Earth, the first landing craft touched down near Refuge Alpha. The doors opened, and for the first time in 30,000 years, humans from the stars walked on their homeworld. They had kept their promise. They had held the line, and now finally they were bringing their people home. The evacuation of Earth survivors took 3 days. 3 days during which the crew of the Indomitable worked without rest, bringing up 50,000 people who had lived their entire lives underground, who had never seen the stars except through ancient recordings, who had kept the faith when every logical reason said they should have given up hope. Texali watched the reunions in the Indomitable's main hangar bay. Descendants meeting ancestors who had lived 30,000 years ago, but had only aged 7,000 years subjectively. The cultural gap should have been enormous, but somehow it wasn't. They were all human. They all remembered Earth. They all carried the same stubborn refusal to surrender that had defined their species since the beginning. Marcus Chen stood before Admiral Okonkwo, a man in his 60s who had spent his entire life as administrator of Refuge Alpha. He had maintained the old systems, preserved the old stories, and kept his people alive through sheer determination and hope. Now he stood before the woman who commanded the returning warriors, and his eyes were wet with tears. "We kept the archives," he said, his voice shaking. "Every record we could save. History, literature, music, art. Even when the power systems failed and we had to choose between life support and data storage, we kept the archives. We knew that if we lost our culture, we lost everything that made us human. Okonkwo placed a hand on his shoulder. You did more than survive, Mr. Chen. You preserved our heritage. You kept humanity alive in the darkness. That takes a courage we can't even measure. The children, Chen said. They grew up in caves, breathing recycled air, eating synthetic food. They never saw rain. They never felt wind. They never saw a sunrise. What kind of life is that? The kind that ends today? Okonkwo replied. We're taking everyone off Earth while we restore the planet. And when we're done, when it's green and blue and beautiful again, we're bringing everyone home, all of us, together. But even as the evacuation continued, the galactic situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Council's emergency session had turned into a shouting match as species took sides. Some supported humanity's claim to Earth. Others worried about setting a precedent that would destabilize thousands of years of property law. And the Vrin Collective was threatening economic warfare if their legal ownership of Earth wasn't recognized. Then the sensor alarms started screaming. Thexali was on the bridge when it happened, documenting the evacuation efforts for her report. The display suddenly went red with warnings. Every sensor on the Indomitable was detecting the same thing. A spatial distortion, a tear in reality, something coming through from somewhere else. Admiral to the bridge, the watch officer called. We have a situation. Okonkwo arrived within seconds, still in the casual uniform she'd worn for meeting the survivors. She took one look at the sensors and her expression went stone cold. No, it's impossible. We sealed the breach. We collapsed the pocket dimension. What is it? Thexali asked, but she already knew. She could see it on the displays. The signature was different from anything in the galactic database, but somehow familiar. Something that bent space in ways that made sensors report errors rather than readings. It's the swarm, Okonkwo said quietly. Or something like it. A fragment that must have escaped before we collapsed the dimension. It followed us back. The tear in space widened and something emerged. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't even clearly definable as a physical object. It was more like a wound in reality. A place where the normal laws of physics had given up trying. And it was growing, feeding on the energy of normal space, converting matter into more of itself. Every species in the galaxy knew the swarm from ancient records, the existential threat that had nearly destroyed all biological life 35,000 years ago. The nightmare that had required the sacrifice of an entire species to contain. And now it was back. The Council communication channels exploded with panic. The Vrin fleet, still crippled from the earlier engagement, was desperately trying to evacuate the system. Every ship with working engines was running. And Thexali couldn't blame them. She wanted to run too. Every instinct in her crystalline body was screaming at her to get as far away as possible. But the humans weren't running. Battle stations, Okonkwo ordered, her voice calm despite the situation. Wake up, everyone. All crews, all shifts. I need every person on this ship ready to fight. And someone get me a channel to the Galactic Council immediately. The channel opened within seconds. Every council member, every species representative, every military commander in range. All of them were watching, waiting to see what the humans would do. This is Admiral Kezia Okonkwo to all council forces. The swarm has returned. We believe this is a fragment that escaped our dimensional prison. It's small now, but it will grow exponentially if not stopped immediately. She paused, and Thexali could see the calculations running behind those eyes. We can stop it. We know how, but we'll need help. What kind of help? The council chairman asked. His voice was shaking. The swarm was every species' nightmare, the thing that had nearly ended all life in the galaxy. We need every ship in this system to evacuate immediately. Get everyone to minimum safe distance. Then we need you to trust us. Okonkwo looked directly at the camera. 7,000 years ago, humanity volunteered to hold the line. We went into hell so that you could live. Now we're asking you to let us finish the job. You want us to leave you alone with that thing? The Vrin commander asked. How do we know you can stop it? How do we know you won't just make it worse? Because we've been fighting it for 7,000 years, Okonkwo said flatly. Because we've studied it, learned it, and developed weapons specifically designed to kill things that shouldn't be able to die. And because if we fail, everyone dies anyway, so you might as well let us try. The council chairman looked around at the other representatives. Thexali could see the fear in all of them, but also something else. A desperate hope. Because if the humans had survived fighting the swarm for 7,000 years, maybe they really did know how to stop it. All ships, evacuate to the outer system, the chairman ordered, and may whatever gods you believe in protect us all. The evacuation was chaotic but effective. Within an hour, every non-human vessel had retreated to the edge of the star system. Only the Indomitable remained, floating between Earth and the growing swarm fragment. And aboard the human ship, 50,000 warriors prepared for what might be their final battle. "Mr. Chen," Okonkwo said, turning to the refugee administrator, "I need you to take all the survivors to the escape pods. If this goes wrong, the pods will automatically jump to the Council fleet. You'll be safe." "No," Chen said simply. "We didn't survive 30,000 years underground just to run now. If you're fighting to save Earth, we're staying. All of us." Okonkwo looked like she wanted to argue, but she saw the determination in his eyes, the same stubborn refusal to surrender that had kept humanity alive through impossible odds. She nodded slowly. "Then get your people to the shelter decks, and pray that we're as good as we think we are." The swarm fragment was growing. It had started small, barely larger than a ship. Now it was the size of a city, and it was accelerating. Tendrils of impossible matter reached out, touching asteroids and converting them into more swarm material. The temperature in local space was dropping as it fed on thermal energy. Stars nearby were starting to flicker as it drained their output. "All weapons online," the tactical officer reported. "Dimensional disruptors ready. Molecular disassemblers charged. Drone swarms deployed." "Good," Okonkwo said. "Now let's show this thing why it should have stayed dead." The Indomitable accelerated directly toward the swarm. Every sensor in the system tracked it. Broadcast to every ship, every station, every species in the galaxy. This was not just a battle. This was humanity's final statement. Either they would prove they deserved their place in the galaxy, or they would die trying. The swarm noticed them. Tendrils of impossible matter reached out, trying to touch the ship, to convert it into more of itself. But the Indomitable's dimensional shields held. The swarm's matter couldn't exist in the same space as the ship's defensive grid. When they touched, the swarm's material simply ceased to be, shunted into pocket dimensions where it couldn't regenerate. "Firing molecular disassemblers," the tactical officer called. The Indomitable's main weapons engaged, beams of focused energy that didn't burn or cut but simply unmade things at the atomic level. Where they touched the swarm, holes appeared, not wounds that could heal. Empty spaces where the swarm's matter had been broken down into component atoms that could no longer hold together. But the swarm was fighting back. It was learning, adapting, changing its structure to resist the weapons. This was what made it so dangerous. It evolved in real time, becoming immune to whatever killed it. In the original war, it had taken humanity thousands of years to develop weapons that could permanently kill swarm material. It's adapting to the disassemblers, the tactical officer reported. Effectiveness down to 60%. 50%, 40. "Switch to dimensional displacement," Okonkwo ordered. "Don't destroy it. Send it somewhere else." The Indomitable's weapons changed mode. Instead of breaking down matter, they opened temporary gates to empty pocket dimensions and pushed swarm material through. It was like scooping water from a bucket and throwing it into the void. The swarm couldn't adapt to being physically removed from reality, but it was still growing faster than they could displace it. For every cubic kilometer of swarm they pushed away, 2 more appeared. The math was simple and brutal. "They were losing, Admiral," the sensor officer said quietly. "At current rate, the swarm will reach critical mass in 4 hours. After that, nothing will stop it. It will consume this entire system in a week. The galaxy in a century." Okonkwo sat in her command chair watching the displays. Thexali could see the calculations running through her mind. The same kind of impossible math that had defined 7,000 years of warfare. How do you kill something that adapts to everything? How do you win when the enemy grows stronger with every attack? "There's one way," Okonkwo said finally. "But it's not going to be popular." She opened a channel to engineering. "How much antimatter do we have in reserve?" "Approximately 5,000 metric tons, Admiral. Enough to run the ship for another 100 years of combat operations. And if we detonated it all at once." There was a pause. "That would create an explosion roughly equivalent to a supernova, Admiral. At point-blank range, it would destroy the swarm, this ship, Earth, and probably half the system." What if we detonated it inside a collapsing pocket dimension? Another pause, longer this time. Theoretically, the explosion would be contained in the dimension as it collapsed. The dimension would implode, taking the swarm and the explosion with it. Nothing would survive inside, but you'd need to manually activate the collapse sequence. The AI can't do it. The timing has to be perfect, Okonkwo nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll do. Prepare all antimatter reserves for detonation. Route the dimensional collapse controls to the bridge. Admiral, no, the tactical officer said. There has to be another way. There isn't, Okonkwo said simply. We seal the swarm in a pocket dimension, detonate our entire antimatter reserve, and collapse the dimension on top of it. The swarm dies. The galaxy lives. That's the mission. But the ship, Thexali said. You'll be trapped in the collapsing dimension. You can't survive that. No, Okonkwo agreed. We can't, but 50,000 people in the escape pods can. And 50,000 survivors from Earth can. And billions of people across the galaxy can. That's what matters. She stood up, addressing her crew. 7,000 years ago, we volunteered to hold the line. We knew it might be a one-way trip. We knew we might never come home. And we went anyway because someone had to. Because that's what humans do. We stand between the darkness and everyone else. Not because we want to die, but because we refuse to let others die in our place. Okonkwo looked around at her crew, at the faces of people who had fought beside her for millennia. This is the same choice. We can run. We can try to fight from a safe distance. Or we can do what we were built to do. We can finish the mission. We can hold the line one last time. Every crew member stood at attention. There were tears, but also pride. They had survived 7,000 years. They had come home. They had found their people. And now they were being asked to give one more thing. Everything. Execute the plan, Okonkwo ordered. All hands, this is the Admiral. We're going into the final battle. Make peace with whatever gods you believe in. Say goodbye to whoever you need to. And then let's show this thing why humanity earned its place in the galaxy. The Indomitable began opening a pocket dimension, not the small ones they used for shields or weapons. A massive one, large enough to contain the entire swarm fragment and the ship itself. The energy required was enormous, draining the ship's reserves at a terrifying rate. But it was working. The dimension was opening. All survivors to escape pods, Okonkwo ordered. Chen, get your people out. You don't have much time. We're not leaving, Chen said. None of us are. You're giving your lives for us. The least we can do is witness it. To remember. To make sure the galaxy never forgets what you did. Okonkwo started to argue, but she saw it was useless. The descendants were as stubborn as their ancestors. They would stay and bear witness even if it meant dying together. She nodded slowly, accepting their choice. The pocket dimension was fully open now, a tier in reality larger than anything humanity had ever created. The Indomitable accelerated toward it, pulling the swarm along with gravitational beams. The fragment followed, unable to resist the pull. It wanted to consume the ship, to feed on all that delicious matter and energy. We're through, the navigation officer reported. Pocket dimension holding stable. The swarm is fully inside. Begin collapse sequence, Okonkwo ordered. 30-second timer. That should give us enough time to make sure it's trapped. Thexali watched the countdown begin. 30 seconds until the dimension collapsed. 29, 28. The swarm was thrashing now, realizing it was trapped. But there was no escape. The dimensional walls were closing in. It's been an honor, Okonkwo said to her crew. Every single one of you. 7,000 years. We held the line. We held the line, the crew echoed. 10 seconds, 9, 8. The swarm was fully contained now. No fragments escaping. 7, 6, 5. The antimatter detonation sequence was armed. 4, 3, 2, and then something changed. The sensors detected a massive surge of energy from outside the pocket dimension. Ships, hundreds of them, thousands, every species in the Council fleet, every military vessel, every armed merchant ship. They had all turned around and come back. And they were all firing at once, pouring energy into the dimensional walls, stabilizing them from the outside. This is Ambassador Thexali, to the Galactic Council fleet. What are you doing? You'll be caught in the blast. This is Council Chairman, came the response. Humanity held the line for 30,000 years. Now it's our turn. We're reinforcing the dimensional walls from the outside. When you collapse it, we'll make sure nothing escapes. And we're going to pull you out before it implodes. That's impossible, Okonkwo said. The timing is too precise. You can't extract a ship from a collapsing pocket dimension. Humanity taught the galaxy that impossible just means nobody's tried hard enough yet. We're trying now. Hold on, the countdown reached 0. The antimatter detonated. Inside the pocket dimension, a miniature supernova erupted. The swarm material caught in the blast began to disintegrate. Not adapting this time, not evolving. Just dying, torn apart by forces so vast that even its reality-warping abilities couldn't save it. The dimensional walls began to collapse, crushing inward, compressing the blast and the swarm into an infinitely small point. And in that moment, as the dimension imploded, every ship in the Council fleet fired their tractor beams at once. Hundreds of beams, thousands, all focused on one point, all pulling. The Indomitable lurched. Thexali felt the artificial gravity fail, felt herself floating as the ship was torn between collapsing dimension and desperate rescue. The hull groaned under stresses it was never designed to endure. Consoles exploded. Lights flickered. And then, with a sound like reality screaming, the ship emerged from the pocket dimension half a second before it ceased to exist entirely. The swarm was gone. The dimension was gone, and the Indomitable was drifting in normal space, battered and broken but intact. Alive. The bridge was silent except for the sound of emergency alarms and people breathing hard. Okonkwo sat in her command chair, staring at the displays in disbelief. They had survived. Again. Against all odds, humanity had survived. "Damage report," she said quietly. "Main engines are offline," the engineering officer reported, his voice shaking. "Dimensional drives destroyed. Weapon systems inoperative. We're running on backup power. Admiral, this ship will never fight again. She's done." "But we're alive," Okonkwo said. "We're alive, the swarm is dead, and Earth is safe. That's all that matters." The communication channels lit up with transmissions from every ship in the Council fleet. Species that had been enemies minutes ago were now celebrating together. The swarm was gone. The nightmare that had haunted galactic civilization for 35,000 years had finally been destroyed. And humanity had done it. Thexali accessed the main view screen connecting to the Council chairman. "Why did you come back? You were safe. You could have escaped." The chairman, an elderly being from a species that measured their lives in millennia, looked tired but determined. "Because 30,000 years ago we made a promise to humanity. We broke that promise. We forgot them. We sold their world. We erased them from history. And when they came back, they had every right to hate us, to wage war on us, to take revenge." He paused, looking directly at Admiral Okonkwo. "But they didn't. They came seeking what was rightfully theirs. They disabled our ships without killing our crews. They saved survivors we didn't even know existed. And when the swarm returned, they didn't hesitate. They were ready to sacrifice themselves again to save all of us. We couldn't let that happen. Not again. Some debts can never be repaid, but we had to try." The Council convened an emergency session right there, ships maintaining position around Earth while their representatives voted. It was unanimous. Earth was recognized as human sovereign territory. The Vryn would be compensated for their losses, but they had to leave. Immediately, and the galaxy would help humanity rebuild their homeworld. But there was more. "We are also creating the Human Remembrance Fund," the chairman announced. "Every species will contribute. Every world. We're going to help humanity find every lost colony, every memorial, every grave. We're going to help bring them all home. And we're going to build monuments on every Council world, reminding future generations of what humanity did for us. Never again will we forget." The restoration of Earth took 10 years. The Vryn mining equipment was repurposed, used to heal the scars instead of create them. Terraforming technology from a dozen species was employed. Slowly, painfully, the planet came back to life. Oceans turned blue again. Forests grew. The atmosphere cleared. The Indomitable couldn't be repaired. The damage was too extensive, the technology too outdated to integrate with modern systems. So they left it in orbit, a memorial to the ship that had held the line for 7,000 years and saved the galaxy twice. Tourists from every species came to visit it, to walk its scarred corridors and remember. Admiral Okonkwo retired from military service. She had spent 7,000 years at war. She had earned her peace. She settled on Earth, in a small house overlooking what had once been the Atlantic Ocean, and worked on writing the definitive history of humanity's long war. The book took her 20 years to complete. and when it was published, it became required reading in every school in the galaxy. Marcus Chen lived to see Earth bloom again, lived to walk in actual rain, to feel actual wind, to watch an actual sunrise with his grandchildren. He died at 112, surrounded by family, in a world that was green and alive. At his funeral, Admiral Okonkwo gave the eulogy, praising the man who had kept humanity alive in the darkness. The refugees from the underground cities adapted to life on the surface. Some struggled with agoraphobia, unable to cope with open skies after generations underground, but most thrived, grateful to finally live in the world their ancestors had fought to save. And the crew members of the Indomitable, warriors who had known nothing but combat for millennia, learned what peace felt like. Thexali wrote her report on the human situation. It was 10,000 pages long, exhaustively documenting everything she had witnessed. The Council archived it as one of the most important historical documents in galactic civilization. She received numerous awards and commendations. She didn't care about any of them. What she cared about was the small monument that now stood in the council chambers, a black stone pillar engraved with 50,000 names, the crew of the Indomitable, and beneath the names a simple inscription. They held the line so that we could live. May we never forget. 50 years after the return of the Indomitable, humanity had rebuilt. Earth was green and beautiful, hosting a population of 5 million and growing. Human colonies spread across a dozen systems, founded by people who refused to be confined to one world ever again, and the galactic community welcomed them, grateful for the species that had saved them twice. The Council created a new position, human representative. The person who held it had veto power over any decision that might affect humanity's interests. It was an unprecedented level of authority, but the galaxy agreed it was owed. Humanity had earned the right to never be forgotten again. Admiral Kezia Okonkwo was 160 years old when she died, peacefully in her sleep. They buried her on Earth, in a grave that overlooked the ocean next to the memorial for her crew. Millions attended the funeral, representatives from every species in the galaxy, and they all said the same thing, that humanity had saved them, that they would never forget, that the debt could never be repaid. 100 years after Okonkwo's death, a young human girl visited the Indomitable Memorial. She was 12 years old, born on Earth, raised on stories of the ancestors who had held the line. She stood in the observation deck where Admiral Okonkwo had once commanded, looking out at the stars. An elderly alien approached her, a crystalline being who moved with the careful slowness of great age. "Are you interested in history, young one?" The girl nodded. "My teacher says this ship saved the galaxy, twice." "Your teacher is correct," Thexali said, for she had lived long enough to see humanity's grandchildren grow and thrive. "The people who served on this ship sacrificed everything so that we could live. They fought for 7,000 years. They never gave up. They never surrendered. Why did they do it?" the girl asked. "Why did they sacrifice so much?" Thexali was quiet for a moment, remembering Admiral Okonkwo's words from so long ago. "Because that's what humans do. You stand between the darkness and everyone else. Not because you want to die, but because you refuse to let others die in your place." The girl looked out at the stars, and Thexali saw something in her eyes. The same stubborn determination that had carried humanity through 30,000 years of loss and betrayal. The same refusal to surrender that had defined the species from the beginning. "When I grow up," the girl said quietly, "I want to join the fleet. I want to help protect people like they did." "Then the galaxy is fortunate," Thexali said, "because it means the line will be held for another generation." They stood together in comfortable silence, human and alien, looking out at the stars that humanity had fought so hard to preserve. Below them, Earth turned slowly, green and blue and beautiful, a world that had died and been reborn, a world that would never be forgotten again. In the schools across the galaxy, children learned about the swarm, about the long war, about the species that had volunteered to walk into hell so that others could live. They learned the names of the 50,000 crew members of the Indomitable. They learned about the survivors who had kept the faith underground. They learned about the day humanity returned, and reminded the galaxy what heroism truly meant. And on every council world and every public square, monuments stood, black stone pillars with 50,000 names and a simple message: they held the line. because some promises should never be broken, some sacrifices should never be forgotten, and some debts can never be repaid, but must always be remembered. Humanity had returned to the stars, and this time the galaxy would never forget.